golfers, welcome back to the channel. One of the biggest issues I see with people who struggle with inside takeaway is the lack of hinge and the wrist going back. So the club doesn't hinge correctly, the club goes excessively inside, and the byproduct of that is when they set up to the golf ball, the hands get really high at address. So if the hands get really high at address, like almost like we're going to hit a putt, there's not a lot of hinge. The club sits relatively high in the palm, that restricts our wrist and arm mobility, so we have our hands really high at address. What's going to happen from here, the higher the hands move in the backswing, the lower the club head's going to go. So the higher the hands go, the lower the club head goes. For example, the lower my hands go, the more the club head is going to hinge up. So golf is a game of opposites. The more my hands up the way, the more the club's going to move down. The more my hands move down, the more the club head's going up. The more the hands work up, the more inside the club head's going to work. This left wrist gets relatively bowed, club face gets relatively closed, club head gets massively inside the hands. So if you're this golfer, don't have the hands too upright at address, that's going to influence the club head going relatively low because the hands are getting relatively high. If you're somebody that rotates a little bit too early where the left arm gets stuck to the chest, club gets really flat, I want you to visualise that you're doing the opposite. So golf is a game of opposites. The more our hands go up, the more the club head's going to go down. The more my hands go down, the more the club head's going to go up. So what we need to do to prevent that inside takeaway, we need to adopt a little bit more hinge on the way back. How does that feel? I almost want you to feel like instead of you rotating early, where the right hip goes too far behind you, the left arm gets too far across your chest too early on, we're adding in the rotation a little bit early on. So we're not necessarily restricting the pelvis, we're just adding in the rotation a little bit later into the back. So if your hands too high at address, where we can see a little bit too much ulnar deviation in my left hand and my right hand, the more the hands are higher at address, the hands go high, club head goes low, then we get really inside. Vice versa, if I add a little bit more, instead of from ulnar deviation, where the thumbs point straight down towards the ground, a little bit more radial deviation, so adding a little bit more hinge, so I feel like my thumb gets more towards the sky, add a little bit cupping and a little bit more extension at left wrist. When I add a little bit more of a wrist hinge, that's going to allow the club to work a little bit higher as the hands work a little bit lower. So don't work the hands up too high, thumbs too much down towards the ground like you're hitting a long chip, because that's going to influence the hands to go high, club head to go low, and then from there we're going to create a big disconnection. So what I want you to feel on the way back, feel like your hands work a little bit lower, so it's the feeling that your hands are almost working a little bit lower to the ground. Influence the club to add in a little bit more hinge. So the feeling from here is the hands go down, the club head's going to work up, so the more the hands work lower, the club head's going to hinge up a little bit quicker, and then from there I'm going to add in the rotation. All I'm feeling, if you struggle with inside takeaway where your hands get really high, we create a little bit too much ulnar deviation. As the club works back, knuckles of the left hand go straight down towards the ground, club face gets excessively closed. What you do, I want you to visualise you're playing a flop shot, your hands are going to go a little bit lower at address, so you're going to stand a little bit further away from the golf ball, half an inch further away, let your hands sit down a little bit lower. The more my hands go down, the more the club head's going to go up, and that's going to add a little bit more cupping in the left wrist. So high hands, too much ulnar deviation, lower hands, a little bit more hinge in this left wrist, a little bit more of an arch. As with the club back, don't rotate that right hip too early, just let the rotation happen, work the club back, feel like the hands go lower, that's going to influence the club head to go up, it's going to allow us to add a little bit more hinge, and then the feeling from here, just feel like my right hip gradually starts to work back in the backswing. So it's the feeling of that right hip going up and back, hands a little bit higher at the top. Don't get the hands too high, that's going to contribute to your inside takeaway. Stand a little bit further away, get the hands a little bit lower. The more the hands work lower, the more the club head is going to hinge up the way. Hands go low, club head goes high. From here, we're adding in the rotation later on, so feeling right hip's going to go up and back. It's going to feel like my weight's going into my right heel. The hands more in front of you, and the club going down, that's going to add a little bit more hinge. It's going to get the hands a little bit higher at the top of the backswing, as opposed to getting really flat laid off, then steeping it. Hands work down, keep the grip end of the club on your left hip. As you get the shaft parallel to your feet line, hands working a little bit lower, that's going to hinge the club head up. From here, hands pretty much matching the angle on my shoulder plane, hands a little bit higher, and then that's going to enable us to create a little bit more space on the way back. It's going to allow us to shallow the golf club come down. So remember, your inside takeaway, the more my hands work high, the more the club head's going to work inside. Golf is a game of opposites, the more my hands work low, the club head's going to work high. So if you struggle with an inside takeaway, really delay the inside takeaway by just adding a little bit more hinge. How does that look? Hands lower, club head working higher, add in the rotation of the right hip later on, feeling of keeping your hands much more in front of your chest. Don't get the left arm too low. Feel like we add a little bit more hinge, feel like your left arm's a little bit higher at the top. From there, that's going to help us create a bit more width with your hands away from your head. Keep your pelvis relatively stable on the way back. Don't add in the rotation too early. Just let that club head gradually start to work behind you. Then from there, hands a little bit higher. Then as we come into impact, two feelings if you struggle shelling the golf club. Right elbow, moving a little bit more in front of the right hip. Right forearm, right hand more towards the sky. Keeping that right arm more behind left arm. And the shoulders a little bit more close towards the target. That's going to enable you to shell the golf club rotation later on, and it's going to prevent the chest to open up too quickly. If you've got any thoughts or any questions regarding that topic, please let me know. Comment below with anything you'd like to see on my channel in future videos. Like the video, subscribe to the channel.